For decades, whenever UFOs are mentioned, most people instinctively assume they are nothing more than strange lights in the sky. Dots that appear and disappear without a trace, lacking clear origin, and therefore easily dismissed as illusions, visual misinterpretations, or exaggerated imagination. However, this entire perspective begins to collapse when certain cases go beyond mere sightings and leave behind tangible physical evidence that exists independently of human memory. Unexplained burn. Marks on the ground, areas where soil structure has been altered at a microscopic level, metallic samples that cannot be analyzed using conventional scientific standards, and even physical injuries on the human body that medicine cannot account for through any known mechanism. It is precisely these elements that shift the conversation out of the realm of belief or skepticism and into a far more dangerous gray zone, one where data exists, but explanations do not. One of the most controversial cases occurred in September 1957 along a quiet coastal region in Brazil, when a group of fishermen, preparing to head out at dawn, were startled by a loud explosion that shattered the stillness, and when they looked up, what they saw did not resemble any known aircraft. A luminous object with no engine sound, no adherence to aerodynamic principles, violently shaking before exploding midair within seconds. What makes this event particularly disturbing is the absence of black smoke, the lack of large debris, and no signs of a conventional aviation accident. Only a rain of metal falling into the ocean, consisting of small silver fragments that were unusually light, resistant to corrosion from seawater, and showed no signs of mechanical processing. When analyzed in laboratories, these samples revealed an almost absolute level of purity, up to 99.99%, far beyond the metallurgical capabilities of that era, and even today difficult to replicate under similar conditions, with no recorded aircraft crash in the area, no nation claiming responsibility, and no official explanation ever provided, leaving behind a single unsettling fact. Something exploded in the sky that day, and what remained did not belong to any technology we understand. But the story does not end there, because years later, in a rural area of Europe, an ordinary farmer, someone with no interest in UFOs or the supernatural, witnessed a disc-shaped object descending from the sky on an otherwise calm afternoon. There was no explosion, no impact. The object hovered before making a near-perfect landing, remained for a few seconds, and then departed just as silently. Yet, when the farmer approached the site, the ground had been compressed into a clearly defined, circular shape. Surrounding vegetation was not merely scorched but appeared damaged at a cellular level, and subsequent analysis revealed that the area had been subjected to temperatures exceeding 300 degrees Celsius in an extremely short time frame, along with exposure to an unidentified form of radiation, all concentrated at a single point as if the effect had been precisely controlled rather than randomly generated. Similar incidents began appearing sporadically across the world, not in overwhelming numbers, but enough to suggest a pattern. In the United States, a police officer on patrol witnessed an oval-shaped craft landing in the desert, accompanied by the presence of two small, non-human entities dressed in white, moving around the object as if performing a task. Within seconds, the craft emitted a surge of energy, ascended vertically, and vanished, leaving behind undeniable physical traces, symmetrical indentations in the ground, scorched soil, and deformed rocks. Authorities conducted investigations, measurements, sample collections, and analyses. Yet despite applying all available scientific methods, the conclusion remained the same: unexplained. What is most significant is that all these cases share a common characteristic. They do not require belief because they leave behind evidence. And it is at this point that the central question begins to shift, no longer asking, do UFOs exist, but something far deeper and more unsettling. If these phenomena are real, if these traces are not random, then what created them? And more importantly, how long has it been here? If the marks left on land force us to question the origin of these unidentified objects, then the next logical and more unsettling step is to ask, where do they come from and where do they go after leaving human sight? For decades, the dominant assumption has always pointed upward, toward outer space, treating it as the source of all UFO activity. However, an alternative perspective, less discussed but increasingly considered, points downward, toward the deep ocean, a domain that remains less understood than even the surface of the moon. Over 70% of Earth is covered by water, yet vast portions of the ocean floor remain largely unexplored, with depths of thousands of meters existing in near total isolation from the world above. No light, extreme pressure, and conditions that render conventional exploration nearly impossible. Paradoxically, these very conditions create an ideal environment for anything that might exist without detection. Among these regions, the Mariana Trench stands out as a particularly significant location. The deepest known point on the planet, exceeding 11,000 meters in depth, where pressure alone can crush most human-made objects unless specifically engineered to withstand it. No sunlight reaches this depth, temperatures hover near freezing, and the rules of survival appear fundamentally altered. Yet despite these extremes, modern exploration has revealed life forms that have adapted in ways once thought impossible, establishing a crucial premise. If life can exist under such conditions, then the existence of more complex structures, perhaps even some form of base, can no longer be dismissed outright. Unofficial reports from submarines and deep-sea probes have occasionally referenced unusual signals originating from extreme depths, sounds that do not match known geological or biological activity, movements that appear deliberate rather than random. While most of this data remains unverified or is interpreted conservatively, it contributes to an emerging pattern. There may be processes occurring beneath the ocean that we do not yet understand, or are not prepared to understand. When this is connected to aerial UFO sightings, a new hypothesis begins to form. Not all unidentified objects necessarily come from outside, but some may be emerging from below. This could explain a detail frequently reported by witnesses: objects entering or exiting the ocean without creating significant impact, without shock waves, without the expected resistance of water. If these objects can transition seamlessly between air and deep-sea environments, then their technology surpasses anything currently known to humanity. And if they can operate under extreme oceanic pressure, then establishing a base in such an inaccessible region becomes a strategically perfect choice. Another factor reinforcing this hypothesis is the growing investment in deep-sea exploration technologies by major scientific institutions, not solely for biological or geological purposes, but also to better understand extreme environments similar to those found in extraterrestrial oceans. Some suggest this may also reflect an indirect effort to better understand Earth's own oceans, which may conceal far more than we currently realize. If the idea of an underwater base sounds like science fiction, it is worth noting that much of what was once considered fiction originated from gaps in understanding. When data is limited, imagination fills the void, but as fragmented data begins to accumulate, it forces a shift in questioning. Not does this exist, but if it does, why haven't we clearly seen it? And in the case of the deep ocean, the answer may be unsettlingly simple, because we have not truly looked deep enough. As the evidence on land connects with the unknowns beneath the ocean, a larger picture begins to emerge. One that no longer revolves around distant origins in space, but instead suggests a closer, more immediate, and more difficult possibility. That part of the answer may lie directly beneath us, hidden in the darkness of the deep sea, a realm humanity has only barely begun to access. Yet at the very point where all these hypotheses converge, from physical traces on land to the possibility of deep-sea connections, another direction emerges, one less dramatic but arguably more grounded. The real concern may not be whether an underwater base exists, but how we interpret all of this data. When humans encounter unexplained phenomena, the brain does not tolerate uncertainty. It seeks to fill gaps with familiar patterns, constructing coherent narratives even when they remain unverified, and it is precisely here that a subtle form of control begins to take shape, not imposed externally, but arising from the way perception itself operates. When a series of disconnected events, unusual metal fragments, burn marks, unidentified flying objects, deep-sea signals, are assembled into a unified narrative, they create the illusion of understanding. Yet that feeling is not equivalent to truth. It is merely the brain recognizing a pattern. Once accepted, new information tends to be interpreted in ways that reinforce the existing model, creating a feedback loop. Belief leads to selective evidence gathering, contradictions are minimized, and the belief becomes increasingly stable without requiring stronger proof. In today's digital environment, this mechanism is amplified. Information systems are optimized not for accuracy, but for engagement, meaning that emotionally stimulating, curiosity-driven, or belief-confirming content is prioritized. gradually placing individuals within informational bubbles where similar viewpoints are continuously reinforced. The perception that everyone thinks this way becomes less a reflection of reality and more a product of algorithmic filtering. From this perspective, control no longer implies force but direction, the direction of what we see, how we interpret it, and ultimately the decisions we make. When only part of the picture is visible, the rest does not need to be actively hidden. It simply remains outside awareness, and what is not perceived cannot be questioned. This creates a paradox. Individuals feel they are making independent choices, while the range of available options has already been shaped by prior exposure. The more one consumes a particular type of content, the more it is reinforced, gradually aligning one's worldview with that stream of information. This is not coercion, but conditioning through repetition and convenience. Returning to the original question, whether there exists some hidden force behind these phenomena, the answer may not lie in an unknown species beneath the ocean or beyond the stars, but within the structure of the informational ecosystem we inhabit. When independent analysis weakens, any narrative, accurate or flawed, can become perceived reality if repeated consistently and aligned with existing beliefs. This leads to a psychological twist. The greatest threat may not be an external observer in the shadows, but the possibility that we are constructing a distorted version of reality ourselves, one we accept as truth, act upon, and never fully verify. At that point, control requires no advanced technology or physical presence. It operates entirely within the way we process information. Therefore, the essential question shifts once more, not whether an underwater base exists, but when encountering compelling information, are you evaluating it or merely fitting it into what you already believe? Because the answer to that determines not only how you perceive the world, but how susceptible you are to being shaped by it. And finally, when all the pieces appear to align, from unexplained physical evidence to deep ocean hypotheses and the mechanics of human cognition, quiet, unsettling conclusion begins to form. Perhaps the fundamental mistake has been the assumption that there must be a distinct entity behind it all. Every theory has revolved around identifying what it is, yet none require that assumption to be true. Instead, what stands out is how all evidence consistently exists at the threshold between suggestive and inconclusive, as if suspended in a state that provokes but never confirms. This raises another possibility, that these phenomena are not intended to manifest as physical presences, but rather as cognitive triggers, signals strong enough to provoke interpretation, forcing the human mind to complete the narrative using its own belief systems. Because every unexplained event compels the brain to search for meaning, and in doing so, it gradually shapes its own framework of understanding without direct interference. You are not forced to accept a specific explanation. You feel free in your conclusions. Yet the range of interpretations available to you may already be constrained. And once interpretation is guided, conclusions follow naturally, creating the illusion of independent thought while operating within predefined patterns. This leads to a final, chilling twist. There may be no hidden beings beneath the ocean, no external force actively observing or controlling humanity, yet a system still exists, one without form or identity, that interacts with human perception through information, data, and the gaps between them. It does not need to fully conceal itself, only to appear enough to initiate questioning, allowing individuals to carry themselves deeper into the search for answers. And as that process continues, the boundary between fact and inference blurs, until certainty itself becomes unstable. At that moment, control no longer resides externally, but internally, in how you think, interpret, and define reality. And so the ultimate question is no longer whether something out there is controlling us, but if one day you realize that your entire perception of reality may have been shaped in advance, can you still claim that those thoughts truly belong to you?